Jennifer Daugherty. On February 11, 2010, a truck driver traveling through Greensburg, Pennsylvania, noticed something odd on the otherwise quiet streets. As he passed the Greensburg-Salem Middle School, his attention was drawn to a tipped-over trash can. Though it would have been simpler to ignore it, his curiosity got the better of him. When he investigated, he discovered a gruesome sight. Inside the trash can lay the badly mangled and bloody corpse of a woman. While he couldn't make sense of what he was seeing, he immediately dialed 911 and the police rushed to the scene to inspect the remains of what seemed like a nightmarish act. On their arrival, the cops saw the body haphazardly stuffed into the dumpster with several knife stab wounds. Besides, they shockingly discovered that the woman had several bruises on her, indicating she was badly beaten by her attacker before they had killed her. The corpse also looked mysteriously out of place in a dumpster outside a middle school, suggesting that it was not the site of the murder, but the site of disposal. While searching the battered body of the woman, the police found a note in the back pocket of her pants. The condition of the body completely betrayed the contents of the note, and the only shred of truth it carried was the name of the unfortunate victim, Jennifer. What really happened to this woman? How horrifying were her final moments before she ended up getting killed in such a terrible manner? A little more scrutiny enabled the cops to track down the parents of the now deceased Jennifer Daugherty, who were then called in to identify her body. The parents, Richard and Denise Daugherty, were shocked out of their wits on seeing that their sweet daughter was taken away from them in such a vicious manner. They informed the police that Jennifer was 30 years old. However, her intellectual and psychological challenges had limited her mental age to that of a 12 to 14-year-old girl. Born on November 8, 1979 in Latrobe of Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, Jennifer was a bright soul who had a very warm and welcoming vibe. While she got bullied by several kids in her school days because of her mental challenges, her personality allowed her to befriend several likable companions. On that fateful day, while talking to Jennifer's parents, the cops surprisingly came to learn that she was a resident of Mount Pleasant. This made them question what she was doing in Greensburg and who really took her life. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now, let's move on with the video. The Daughertys told the police that their girl regularly visited Greensburg for her medical appointments. She was also taking life skill lessons at the West Place Clubhouse in Greensburg, which also involved getting trained to become a mechanic. This time, however, she had arrived in the city to meet a new group of friends for a sleepover. Jennifer had met this group of 6 people via Angela Marinucci, whom she bumped into while taking her lessons at the West Place Clubhouse. Both girls hit it off very well, and Angela introduced Jennifer to her friends, Ricky Smyrns, Melvin Knight, Amber Menninger, Robert Masters, and Peggy Miller. While Jennifer had been battling with mental challenges, surprisingly, she wasn't alone anymore. Everyone in the new gang of friends had their own cognitive challenges, and so they stuck close to each other. Many of them had developed these issues because of bad childhoods trampled with negative experiences. Such relatable issues helped Jennifer to quickly bond with the group and be happy in the company of others like her, who were also trying to live despite their psychological struggles. Jennifer's parents showed complete trust in this new group of friends since they had observed that their daughter was very happy with them. Before going out on February 10, 2010, Jennifer had left a note for her mother saying that she would be back home after the sleepover by the next day afternoon. In fact, she even mentioned the contact details of all 6 friends to reach out to in case of any unforeseen emergencies. Sadly, these words turned out to be her last bits of communication with her parents, and the first lead in the investigation of her murder. According to the Daugherty, something must have happened after the time Jennifer got off the bus so as to reach the house where the fun getaway was planned. The police decided to meet this group in good faith and ask if they knew anything about this gruesome murder. But little did they know that they would discover something completely sinister and unbelievable. From the outside, the house where Jennifer was supposed to meet her friends seemed rather dull and ordinary. It still had some lights on its exterior, suggesting that the Christmas decorations hadn't been taken off. But when the cops walked in through the door, they discovered that the house, which adorned a semi-festive look, was plagued with the stench of gore and blood. The house occupied by Jennifer's friends turned out to be the crime scene where she was badly beaten and killed, with almost every corner of the house reeking of the grim nature of the incident. The cops apprehended all 6 in the group who didn't try very hard to deny what had happened in the face of all the glaring evidence in the house. While just a glimpse of Jennifer's body screamed torture, the evidence found in the house of the Greensburg 6 confirmed that she was badly humiliated before being killed. In the house, the police found all the objects that were used to hurt the helpless Jennifer along with the murder weapon, which was a kitchen knife that eventually ended her final breath. The cops relentlessly questioned everyone and asked them what happened during the night of the sleepover on February 10, 2010. The statements from the Greenberg 6 revealed that the sleepover was just a trap for Jennifer and that her punishment was pre-planned instead of being something accidental. They also learned that the mastermind behind this heinous crime was none other than the youngest of them all, Angela Marinucci, who was also Jennifer's close friend. Just when Jennifer crossed their doorstep, the group put their plans into action, and they suddenly began hitting her. Jennifer was quite confused at the time since this wasn't the welcome she was expecting. Why did this new group of friends she had trusted so much suddenly turn hostile? What sick intentions might have motivated these 6 people to mercilessly hurt a mentally challenged friend and eventually take her life? Jennifer's phone and purse were immediately confiscated by the group, who began their grueling torture session that would go on for 36 long hours. They tore her purse and poured several fluids into it. Angela and Amber initiated the physical assault and beat Jennifer up with several objects. They took turns as they bruised her with several items, including a sturdy pair of crutches, a vacuum cleaner hose, a towel bar, and a 2-liter lemonade bottle. The duo was later joined by the others who kicked Jennifer repeatedly, crushing her belly and her chest. The badly bruised Jennifer was also forced to gulp down several undrinkable fluids, like cooking oil, nail polish, detergent, urine, and even made to eat fleas. All of these were poured onto her head, followed by oatmeal and spices. Jennifer retaliated against the assaults, as she tried to throw her limbs around to attack her assailants. Unfortunately, Jennifer ended up choosing the wrong target by hitting Amber hard in the stomach. The group said that Amber was pregnant and escalated their assault on Jennifer after tying her with Christmas lights and decorations to prevent her from standing up to them again. The group shaved Jennifer's head and smeared her face with nail polish while continuing to thrash her. Unable to fight, Jennifer tried begging her attackers for mercy. The group neither stopped nor explained while she became the victim of their sadism. Instead, Melvin Knight took off Jennifer's clothes and forced himself on the heavily bruised victim while everyone else watched. After Melvin was done, they forced Jennifer into the bathroom to have a shower, citing the trouble they were having with her stench. While Jennifer thought that her captors were done with her, you would discover next that she couldn't have been more wrong. The thrashing instantly resumed, and Jennifer's mini-illusion was instantly shattered. But things did come to a stop afterwards, since the Greensburg 6 got bored of constantly beating Jennifer to a pulp. The group then decided to vote to either let Jennifer go on the expectation that she would remain quiet, or to kill her and get rid of her body. Jennifer begged her supposed friends to set her free. But the next morning, February 11th, she learned that all 6 had unanimously voted to end her life. Before killing her, the group somehow thought that making Jennifer write a note would shield them whenever her body was found. For reasons unknown, the group made Jennifer take several antibiotics, painkillers, and sleeping pills before Ricky Smirms asked Melvin to stab her in the chest. This could either be due to an unexpected return of their conscience, or an attempt to prolong Jennifer's suffering using medicines. The latter stands more probable, since they didn't spare the life of the already tortured Jennifer. Thus, any consideration of the Greensburg 6's empathy towards their unfortunate victim was completely out of the question. Instead, Melvin plunged a knife into Jennifer's body thrice, striking her chest and her throat. He later checked on her to find that she was still alive and slashed her wrist to end Jennifer's life. The group didn't immediately dispose of Jennifer's body. Angela Marinucci asked the group to prop the dead body up and wrap it in Christmas lighting to get a dazzling display of their monstrosity. But when the damaged Christmas lights didn't work, the frustrated group stuffed her body in a trash can where it was eventually found. All of this clearly showcased that none of the six had any form of remorse over their actions. But what really made them carry out this torture cum murder? After learning of such a horrifying account, cops cracked down hard on everyone to find out why they made Jennifer suffer so much. The Greensburg Six revealed that Jennifer had developed a crush on Ricky, who was Angela's boyfriend at the time. Moreover, Angela once caught Ricky secretly speaking with Jennifer over the phone. This made her furious with jealousy, following which she decided to punish her new friend for crossing the line and hatched a plan with Amber. Cops found that this flow of romance wasn't one way, as Ricky later revealed that he loved Jennifer as well. Both had confessed their love to each other, and had also been intimate on a few occasions behind Angela's back. This really made the detectives think as to why Ricky participated or even approved of whatever happened with Jennifer. Especially, he could have avoided everything by simply warning Jennifer and asking her not to come for the sleepover. The confession from the other members of the Greensburg Six, especially Peggy Miller and Robert Masters, revealed that Angela was a very dangerous woman, and they were very afraid of her. Peggy and Robert also said they didn't participate in any of the violence, and were willing to cooperate with the police and get a plea deal in court. However, the fear analogy didn't stand true for everyone, especially Melvin Knight, who seemed to have enjoyed torturing and assaulting Jennifer the most. Nevertheless, when things came down to the point for each member to vote, none of them voted to let Jennifer live despite already having made her go through a hellish nightmare. However, the police now had what they needed to get justice for Jennifer Daugherty. The hearing for the case began on November 3, 2010, revealing that Angela, Ricky, and Jennifer had a very complex love triangle, with Ricky being at the center of it all. Angela had actually overheard Ricky speaking with Jennifer when she had heard him saying that he loved her and wanted to marry her. This made Angela fume with rage, since she had been his girlfriend for several years. The state of Pennsylvania had never seen a heinous and violent crime of this degree. On August 3, 2011, when giving the verdict, the court found the charges against Angela serious enough for death penalty. But since she was only 17 at the time of the incident, she ended up receiving life imprisonment without parole for first-degree murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit murder. Due to certain unrelated developments, her sentence saw some revisions, with the final order coming in May 2022. Angela is now undergoing her sentence, and would be eligible for parole only in 2070. Ricky Smyrns and Melvin Knight, however, received the death penalty on February 28, 2013 and April 12, 2012 respectively. Knight later challenged his sentence in September 2014, stating that the jury was prejudiced towards him, but the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania upheld his sentence twice. Speaking about her judgment on Knight, Pennsylvania Supreme Court's Chief Justice Deborah Todd said that the jury was not biased in its judgment to give the death penalty to Melvin Knight. She instead noted that the decision was made after a thorough examination of a large pool of evidence, which proved Knight and the rest of the Greensburg Six having subjected Jennifer, a mentally challenged woman, to several forms of assault and torture, eventually killing her. Amber Menninger pled guilty to third-degree murder, conspiracy, and kidnapping. Though she had initially tried to get some relief citing her pregnancy, once she found out she could be facing the death penalty, she chose to cooperate as a witness and received a sentence of 40 to 80 years in prison on December 4, 2013. Prior to the trial, Peggy Miller and Robert Masters had already agreed to testify as witnesses. During the trial, Robert revealed that he had almost helped Jennifer in escaping and also returned her clothes while Melvin and Ricky were outside the house, but they returned before Jennifer could flee from the place. The courts, however, noted that neither Peggy nor Roberts chose to inform the police of what happened and only came forward as witnesses to get plea deals. Although they didn't participate in any of the violence, they did help in keeping Jennifer hostage and also voted to kill her. Peggy received a sentence of 35 to 74 years, and Robert got a sentence of 30 to 70 years on March 17, 2014. The accounts of Peggy and Robert also ushered in the need for a law in Pennsylvania to charge anybody witnessing a violent crime and withholding the information from the police with third-degree murder. This law was proposed by Senator Kim Ward in 2012, and he tabled the proposal as Jennifer's Law. Speaking at the trial of the murderers of her sister, Joy Buckholder said, "Jennifer was exploited. Her kindness and her handicap made her very vulnerable. She did not have a single mean bone in her body." Jennifer's family also took the blame of their beloved's murder on themselves, since they thought they shouldn't have left Jennifer alone despite knowing that she needed the love, help, and support of someone close at almost all times. The horrifying and gruesome end of Jennifer Daugherty really shook one and all concerned from within. Jennifer's parents were especially devastated to know that their daughter was tortured, assaulted, murdered, and hoisted as a trophy in cold blood. To add to their grief, she was killed by the very people she trusted and someone whom she had fallen in love with. The doctors had been thinking of getting Jennifer a place of her own in Greensburg where she could live more independently with a network of reliable friends by her side. The murder of Jennifer Daugherty remains one of the most chilling cases, largely due to the brutal and senseless nature of her death at the hands of the Greensburg Six. Evidence suggests that several of the perpetrators had known mental health struggles, which could have influenced their actions. However, it's important to consider whether their mental challenges fully explain their participation in such a horrific act, or if the cruelty and violence they exhibited were rooted in something darker, like a propensity for sadistic behavior. Ultimately, while mental health issues might have played a role, the capacity for such cold-blooded torture and murder seems to stem from deeper, more complex factors. Moving on to the next case. Julianne Williams. Julie Williams, 24, and Laura Winans, 26, embarked on a camping trip along the Appalachian Trail in Shenandoah National Park, Virginia, in May of 1996. The couple, who had met nearly 2 years earlier at Woodwoman, a nonprofit focused on adventure travel for women, shared a deep love for the outdoors. Along with Laura's golden retriever, Taj, the pair set out on May 19, 1996, looking forward to their time in nature. Tragically, their trip would end in a mysterious and unsolved double homicide that left their loved ones and authorities searching for answers. However, they never arrived back home. Nearly 2 weeks later, on May 31, 1996, Thomas Williams, Julie's father, reported his daughter missing after neither of the women's families had heard from them. Park rangers immediately launched the search of the area for the missing couple, and soon they located Julie and Laura's car just north of Skyland Lodge. During the search, Laura's golden retriever, Taj, was found wandering around seemingly unharmed. The next day, rangers came upon a campsite and discovered Julie and Laura's bodies. Laura was found in her tent, gagged with her hands bound with duct tape. Her legs were tied with a pair of thermal underwear. Although partially undressed, there were no outward signs of sexual assault. Subsequent forensic analysis showed that the duct tape gag had previously been used to bind Julie's hands. Julie was found 75 feet from their tent in her sleeping bag. She was naked, gagged, and had her hands bound with duct tape. Investigators noted that unlike Laura, her legs were not tied. While there was no outward evidence of sexual assault, it was suggested that the May 2nd have been tortured, though no specific details were released. Both women died from having their throats slashed with a sharp knife. Determining the time of death was challenging, but the coroner estimated that the deaths occurred between May 26th and May 28th, although some indications suggest that the deaths may have happened the night of May 24th. Photos left behind in the couple's camera offer a glimpse into the final days of Julie and Laura's lives. The women arrived in Shenandoah National Park on May 19, 1996, setting off into the woods of the White Oak Canyon Trail only to return a few days later due to rain. They then hitched a ride with the park ranger and renewed their camping permit before venturing out again. They climbed Hawksbill, the highest mountain in Shenandoah, and made their camp that night in a picturesque spot next to a stream near the Appalachian Trail. Surrounded by the peacefulness of nature, it would be shortly after they set up camp that Julie and Laura's lives would come to a vicious and violent end. Given the women's sexual orientation and the brutal and calculated nature of the murders, authorities wondered if they were victims of a hate crime. An incarcerated man named David Dorrell Rice became a suspect in the case. He was known for expressing his hatred toward women and the LGBT community specifically. He was later arrested after an attempted abduction of a female bicyclist in Shenandoah National Park. He would eventually serve a 10-year sentence for the abduction attempt. Investigators continued to look into possible connections between him and the double homicide, and in April of 2002, Rice was indicted on capital murder charges in the Shenandoah National Park killings. In the statement of facts, authorities claimed that he targeted Julie and Laura out of a hatred for women and for the homosexual community. However, 2 years later, the charges against Rice were dropped once it was determined that DNA and hair samples from the crime scene did not match to Rice. Additional testing revealed that the hair found was visually similar under a microscope to that of known serial killer Richard M. Evenitz. In June of 2002, Evenitz was about to be arrested for an unrelated crime, but he ended up killing himself as police closed in. Forensic evidence eventually linked Evenitz to the unsolved murders of 3 teenage girls, all killed in the mid-90s. As these crimes also occurred in Virginia around the same time that Julie and Laura were murdered, Evenitz was considered a suspect, but nothing else connected him to the crime directly. For the next 25 years, the case remained cold, but in 2021, a new FBI Richmond investigative team was assigned to review the case. The task force re-examined previous leads and interviews as well as evidence recovered from the site of the killings. The team sent the evidence collected from the crime scene and had it retested by an accredited private lab. The private lab collected DNA from, quote, several items of evidence, and with the help of Virginia State Police, the DNA profile was sent to the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, also known as CODIS. Finally, in June of 2024, the DNA was positively matched to Walter Leo Jackson Sr., a convicted serial rapist from Cleveland. Jackson, who had painted homes for a living, died in an Ohio prison in March of 2018. He had an extensive criminal history, including convictions for kidnapping and assault. At the time of the killings, Jackson, who officials said was an avid hiker, was believed to have been driving a 1984 chestnut brown AMC Eagle 30 and later drove a Ford van. At a press conference, the FBI revealed details about the vehicles associated with the suspect, Jackson, and released photos of him, seeking the public's assistance in determining whether he may have had additional victims. Despite ongoing investigations into possible further crimes, after 28 years, the murders of Julie Williams and Laura Winans are now officially considered a closed case. The tragic killings remain a haunting reminder of the dangers lurking even in the most serene of locations. And though justice has been served for these 2 women, questions surrounding other potential victims linger. Moving on to the next case. Linda Hazzard. In the 19th century, alternative medicines were often marketed as miracle cures for a wide range of ailments, despite their dangerous properties. Strychnine was sold as an athletic performance booster, heroin was given to children as a remedy, and cocaine was recommended for treating alcoholism, with Sigmund Freud even endorsing its medical uses. These substances were widely available in various forms, including powders, wines, and soft drinks. Thankfully, by 2023, medicine has advanced significantly, prioritizing safety and scientific evidence in its treatments. But back then, science was not so advanced, and the general public didn't have access to information the way we do today. As a result, they were often misinformed and relied on those who sold themselves as doctors. One of the most nightmarish figures of the late 19th, early 20th century who masqueraded as a health professional was a woman by the name of Linda Hazzard. Hazzard was born Linda Lauren Burfield on December 18, 1867 in the small city of Carver nestled along the banks of the Minnesota River. While today, the city has almost 6,000 residents, back in the 1860s, it had a population of just over 700 people. Hazzard was the oldest child born to Susanna Neal and Montgomery Burfield, and had 6 siblings. At the age of 18, she married and went on to give birth to 2 children. But in 1898, she left her family behind to return to Minnesota, where she pursued a medical career. Hazard never attended university and never acquired a medical degree, but she managed to nab a medical license for herself in the state of Washington by exploiting a loophole that saw alternative medicine practitioners being exempt from more modern regulations. Hazard was a staunch believer in therapeutic fasting. According to her book, The Science of Fasting, she spent a great deal of time studying under Edward Hooker Dewey, a doctor who advocated for fasting and invented the no breakfast plan, wherein he argued that people should only consume 2 meals a day and they should give up breakfast, claiming that disease and physiological problems were the result of excessive eating. He believed fasting could even cure mental health issues. However, many doctors disagreed with Dewey's takes. In 1910, the British Medical Journal described him as not an accurate or careful writer, as he had written many medical errors throughout his books. They also labeled his claims that fasting was a cure-all for disease as a foolish delusion. Other doctors noted that fasting should only be carried out under medical supervision. Hazard, however, was uninterested in the criticism levied against her mentor. She developed her own fasting method that she claimed was a remedy for all sorts of illnesses. Using her technique, one could supposedly rid themselves of toxins which caused imbalances in the body. In 198, aged 41, she published her first book, Fasting for the Cure of Disease. And 9 years later, she released her second, Diet in Disease and Systematic Cleansing. In 1927, her first publication was re-released using the title, Scientific Fasting, The Ancient and Modern Key to Health. In her books, Hazard wrote that the cause of all illness lay in food, something she picked up from her mentor. She stated, "Appetite is craving. Hunger is desire. Craving is never satisfied, but desire is relieved when want is supplied." She believed that the path to good health and long life was to let the digestive system rest by fasting. Despite both Hazard and Dewey receiving disapproval from the wider medical community, the public found the concept of fasting interesting, and it was seen as trendy to partake in it. The success of Hazard's written work helped her to establish a specialized hospital called Wilderness Heights in Olalla, Washington. Inside the walls of Wilderness Heights, inpatients fasted for days, weeks, and even months. Their diets consisted of tiny portions of various fruit and vegetable juices and broths. What they were eating was unsurprisingly nowhere near enough to sustain them, especially since the broth often consisted of a tomato placed in hot water and then removed before the broth was served to patients. While some patients survived their trip to the hospital and would then publicly endorse Hazard's methods, many died while in her care. In defense of her techniques, Hazard would tell people that those who died had succumbed to a separate undiagnosed illness such as cancer or cirrhosis of the liver. Local residents began referring to the hospital as Starvation Heights because the hungry, frail, and skeletal patients could be seen wandering around looking for food and help. Furthermore, Hazard was known to steal the belongings of her patients after death and often had them sign over their estates before their demise. It is believed that Hazard killed her first patient in 1902, long before she published her first book. The patients' post-mortem showed they had died from starvation, and the local coroner attempted to have Hazard prosecuted. Bizarrely, however, because she wasn't licensed to practice medicine, she was not able to be held accountable for her actions. She was reportedly vague when asked about the patient's missing jewelry. Just as her divorce was finalized, Hazard met Samuel Christman Hazard. A former military man, Samuel had ruined his career in the army by misappropriating army funds. He was often described as a drunk, a leck, and a swindler, making him a good match for Hazard and her callous ways. After they married, Samuel spent 2 years in prison as he'd failed to divorce at least one of his wives. One of Hazard's earliest patients was a woman named Gertrude Young. Gertrude had been looking for a cure after she'd been left partially paralyzed following a stroke. She had been left without the function of one leg and one arm. Hazard convinced Gertrude that she had a remedy, promising that a 40-day fast would bring back her mobility. Gertrude, who was clearly desperate and willing to try anything to regain what she'd lost post-paralysis, agreed to the fast and began treatment. A friend accompanied the woman to the hospital and stayed with her, as she was instructed each day by Hazard or her nurses. Gertrude was not allowed to eat food but could consume small amounts of liquid, often consisting of tomato broth or strained orange juice. 30 days into Gertrude's 40-day fast, she was found shaking, sweating, and throwing up what is described as a thick, dark substance. Although it was winter and the temperature was biting outside, Hazard had the windows to the room opened. She insisted her patient needed fresh air, but it seems to make Gertrude all the more ill. Gertrude's companion called her usual doctor, the one who had helped her manage since becoming paralyzed. The doctor explained that Hazard's alleged cure was never going to work and that Gertrude needed to stop fasting immediately. Despite this, however, Gertrude refused to listen to her doctor. Hazard had been so convincing that Gertrude was sure she would be cured if she could just make it another 10 days. But Gertrude Young did not make it. She died on day 39. Hazard, however, was not charged with murder or even manslaughter, as Gertrude was seen to have made the decision to continue with the fast herself since she had opted not to listen to her doctor's advice. Hazard was not intimidated either. She continued to treat patients at her establishment in the exact same way, completely unfazed by her brush with the law. On March 28, 1910, Earl Edward Erdman, a civil engineer based in Seattle, died from starvation in the Seattle General Hospital. Notably, he'd kept a diary of his time at Wilderness Heights, and he'd written down the details of Hazard's methods during the weeks he was in her care. Beginning February 1st and spanning the entire month, Earl ate less than one meal a day. On his very first day at the hospital, his dinner and supper each consisted of mashed soup dinner. 5 days later he had the same, this time with 1 orange for breakfast. 2 weeks into his treatment, he had only 2 oranges for breakfast and no dinner or any supper. Over the next few days, he was given 1 cup of soup per day. Around February 16th, Earl noted, "Slept better last night, head quite dizzy, eyes yellow-streaked and red." 5 days later, he detailed that he was suffering from backache just below his ribs and slept poorly that night. By the end of February, he mentioned having a kind of frontal headache, pain in his right side below his ribs and pain below his ribs in his back. His diet, generally consisting of tomato broth, oranges and strained orange juice, never changed up to his hospitalization on March 28. 2 other patients of Hazard were wealthy heiresses with property in the US, Canada, and Australia. Claire and Dorothy Williamson had been orphaned as children and both dealt with hypochondria, often spending large sums of cash for medical care they didn't really need. At the time of the sisters' arrival, though, Wilderness Heights was not finished being built. As a result, they were treated in an apartment in Seattle, Washington. Their treatment was somehow even more grotesque than that of Gertrude Young. The 2 women were starved, beaten, and subjected to needless hours-long enemas. Nurses would later state that as a part of the inpatient's treatment plans, they were to undergo massages, but that these massages often sounded more like violent physical assaults. The 2 sisters eventually became so frail that they struggled to walk. Neighbors in the apartment complex recalled hearing them crying and screaming. Hazard knew that they were becoming aware that something odd was going on in the apartments, so she ended up placing them on gurneys and having them moved from the building to her unfinished hospital in Olalla. The 2 women had been starved so greatly, they had become delirious. Hazard, though, as cold and callous as she was, decided that this was the perfect opportunity to make herself an extraordinarily wealthy woman. Writing new wills for the sisters, Hazard appointed herself as both their legal guardian and the beneficiary of their estate valued at over $500,000. Furthermore, she stole the pair's jewelry and valuables estimated to be worth around $6,000, wore their clothes, and stopped the 2 from being able to see and speak with each other. It is unclear how, but word emerged that the 2 were in trouble when Dorothy managed to contact the sisters' previous governess. The governess, though, was based in England, although some sources state it was Australia. And by the time she arrived in Washington, Claire had already passed away. She had weighed less than £1.50 at the time of her death. Hazard attempted to shift the blame, claiming that drugs administered to Claire as a child had caused her internal organs to shrink and led to corrosive of the liver. The governess was aghast when she saw the body and noted that Dorothy looked close to death herself. She eventually had the remaining sister removed from Hazard's care after some struggle. She would have to contact one of the sisters' uncles, a wealthy man named John Herbert who lived in Portland, Oregon, to initiate the move. After haggling with Hazard, John paid almost $1,000 for the release of his niece. After securing Dorothy's safety, he turned to Lucien Agassiz, the British vice consul in Tacoma, and together, they began to look into Hazard. They discovered she was connected with the deaths of numerous wealthy individuals, and many of these high society members had signed their riches over before their deaths. One such victim was an Englishman named John Ivan Flux. He'd come to the US to buy a ranch, and yet when he died in Hazard's care, he had only $70 to his name. Furthermore, a New Zealander named Eugene Wackelin reportedly shot himself while he was an inpatient at Wilderness Heights. Before his death, Hazard had managed to become the administrator of his estate and drained all his money. On August 15, 1911, Kitsap County law enforcement arrested Hazard for the first-degree murder of Claire Williamson. Her trial began in January of 1912, and facility employees including nurses testified against Hazard, noting that the sisters endured scorching baths and frequently suffered through enormous pain at the hands of Hazard, who had been dubbed the starvation doctor. During the trial, the public was also made aware of Hazard's tendency to financially drain all of her victims. The prosecution called it financial starvation. The doctor showed no remorse or regrets, and took no responsibility for Claire's demise. In her first book, Hazard wrote, "Death in the fast never results from deprivation of food, but is the inevitable consequence of vitality sapped to the last degree by organic imperfection." And she stuck by that even while on trial for murder. She claimed she was being attacked because she was a successful woman and because she practiced unconventional medicine that traditional doctors disapproved of. Still, the jury did not believe much of what Hazard had to say at her trial. After briefly deliberating, she was found guilty of manslaughter and was ultimately sentenced to between 2 to 20 years in prison. Additionally, her medical license was revoked. She spent her brief stint behind bars at Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla, serving just 2 years before being released on parole on December 26, 1915. The following year, Governor Ernest Lister incredibly gave Hazard a full pardon, though her medical license was never reinstated. Accompanied by her husband, Hazard left the U.S. and moved to New Zealand, where she continued to work as a dietitian and alternative medical practitioner. However, in 1917, a local newspaper revealed that Hazard's medical license only allowed her to practice in Washington. As she used the title doctor, she was subsequently charged in Auckland for practicing medicine while not registered to do so. She was found around 600 New Zealand dollars for this crime. 3 years later, though, Hazard returned to Alala. She opened a new facility here, but this time, she called it a School of Health, as her medical license had been revoked. Despite its name change, the establishment essentially operated in the same way that Wilderness Heights did, and Hazard continued to oversee fasts until the facility burned to the ground in 1935. It was never rebuilt. Although Linda Hazard was only ever charged with one case of manslaughter, she is often seen today as a serial killer due to the numerous patients who perished while under her care, adhering to the supposed treatment plan she had laid out for them. Between 1908 and 1912, Hazard is believed to have caused the deaths of at least 16 people, including Earl Eardman and Claire Williamson, following her controversial advice. Rader, reportedly the original owner of the land where Hazard's Wilderness Heights facility was established, may have been linked to the deaths, though it's possible Hazard was responsible for many more. Ironically, Hazard herself died at the age of 70 on June 24, 1938, after attempting to cure an illness through fasting. Tragically, she passed away from starvation, just as many of her patients had. Moving on to the next case. Patricia Viola. Patricia Viola, a 42-year-old housewife and mother of 2, lived in Bogota, New Jersey, with her husband, James, and their children, Christine and Michael. Patricia was renowned for her dedication to making special occasions memorable for her family. She put a lot of effort into creating elaborate homemade cakes and personalized gifts, and even volunteered as a librarian at her son's school. Her caring nature and attention to detail made her well loved by friends and family. However, Patricia's life took a dark turn when she disappeared under strange circumstances. In the days leading up to her disappearance, there were unsettling events, including an ominous request from a friend, an unusual confrontation, and a burglar alarm being tripped at her home. Patricia's remains were later found 45 miles away, leaving many questions about how she ended up on that beach and what truly happened to her. Patricia was known for her kindness, always going the extra mile to make holidays special with homemade cakes and personalized gifts. She dedicated her time as a volunteer librarian at her son's school and was deeply loved by friends and family for her generosity and nurturing nature. In the months leading up to her disappearance, Patricia had been under significant stress, having spent countless hours caring for her sick mother-in-law and assisting her sister-in-law, Donna, who was staying with the family after going through a difficult breakup. Despite her selflessness and devotion to others, this period of added responsibility weighed heavily on her. She evidently held herself to high expectations, said one family member, and the people in her life had come to expect her for going above and beyond. Patricia had epilepsy and normally carried her medication with her at all times. Roughly 3 months prior to her disappearance in November of 2000, Patricia experienced a grand mal seizure. Following this, her driver's license was suspended for 90 days at the recommendation of her doctor. This was hugely limiting to Patricia's independence and mobility, and reportedly impacted her morale heavily. She could no longer easily do the things she loved, such as going to the mall alone to buy presents for her family, which she expressed sadness about during the Christmas season. Additionally, it made family obligations even more difficult. For instance, Patricia having to travel across town to check on her mother-in-law in the hospital became all the more stressful and time-consuming. In the weeks prior to her disappearance, the stress in Patricia's life continued to mount. Several events were weighing on her heavily and gave loved ones reason to worry. On February 6, 1 week prior to Patricia going missing, Patricia received upsetting news. Her doctor was recommending another 90-day suspension of her driving privileges, extending her time without a license until at least late spring. Patricia was reportedly incredibly depressed by this news. Tensions between Patricia and Donna, her sister-in-law, were continuing to build following issues that arose from Donna staying at the Viola household. Donna was a smoker and Patricia was not. She did not approve of Donna smoking in the house and had so far been unable to convince her to stop. The typically level-headed and non-confrontational Patricia had been managing the effects of Donna's indoor smoking instead by cleaning, vacuuming and airing out Donna's room on a daily basis. The day before she went missing, Patricia discovered that Donna had burned a hole in the guest bedspread, a move that could have started a fire and put the entire family in danger. Although Patricia was upset, she and her husband decided to wait to address it with Donna until the following day. On February 12, 2001, the night before Patricia's disappearance, she and Jim attended a party in Brooklyn, New York at the home of Patricia's best friend and close confidant, Twinette Fazio Markowitz. When Patricia arrived at the party, Twinette noticed that she was immaculately dressed with her hair and makeup done beautifully and fittingly for the occasion, but even then, Twinette recalls she knew something was amiss. As the party progressed, Patricia pulled Twinette into an empty bedroom in order to speak with her privately. Once alone with her friend, Patricia burst into tears. Through heaving sobs, she managed to tell Twinette that she had something which she needed to discuss. But when Twinette pressed her for more details repeatedly, Patricia insisted that the full story was far too complicated to explain that moment. While she did not reveal what was ailing her, Patricia did, however, ask 2 things of her best friend. First, she begged Twinette to cancel her upcoming personal vacation, to which her best friend confusingly agreed. Patricia tearfully claimed that she would soon finally tell Twinette everything if the two of them could just go away together for a few days. She then chillingly asked Toyn for another favor. She asked that Toyn, quote, take care of her kids no matter what. On the morning of Tuesday, February 13, 2001, Jim left for work at his usual departure time of 6:30 a.m. At 8:15, Christine and Michael left for school. Shortly after, Twinette called Patricia to discuss her emotional breakdown the night before. Shockingly, Toinette recalls Patricia brushing off the situation completely, instead redirecting the telephone conversation to the topic of a gag gift that she intended to buy Jim for Valentine's Day, which was to occur the next day. The present she discussed buying Jim was that of a singing monkey in a cage similar to one that Toinette had bought for her own husband. Shockingly to Toinette, Patricia gave no explanation for the events of the previous night nor space in the conversation to even broach the subject. Toinette remembers thinking to herself that Patricia sounded tired and seemed in a hurry to get off of the phone. Immediately after hanging up with Toinette, Patricia reportedly stormed downstairs to confront her sister-in-law Donna. Her anger stemmed from the danger that was brought about by the cigarette-burned bedspread. This confrontation, her husband, Jim, would later remark was extraordinarily out of character for Patricia. Jim recalls being told by his sister that Patricia acted irate and screamed, quote, like a raving maniac. All of this occurred in the mere 20 minutes after the children left for school. At 8:38 a.m., Patricia left her home and walked to Bixby Elementary School, where she volunteered as a librarian. Bixby Elementary was located on the corner of Fisher and Chestnut Avenues, less than 2 blocks away from the family home and an easy walk. Patricia spent roughly 2 hours at the library that day, spending her time shelving books and assisting at the checkout counter. At some point after Patricia left for the library, a local security company got a report of a security alarm going off at the Viola home. At first, they tried to contact Patricia but they were unable to reach her. Those close to her say that while Patricia did have a cell phone, she rarely turned it on. The security company then tried to contact Jim, who was unreachable due to his being at work. The alarm company then called Patricia's mother, who answered the call and promptly called the Viola home to check on her daughter. Finding no answer to her phone call, Patricia's mom left officers from the station performed a visual check of the exterior of the home by walking the perimeter of the property and checking in the windows. Ultimately, they determined that nothing looked abnormal and deduced that the front door probably did not close fully when Patricia left. Such a situation would have triggered the alarm and had happened in the past, so the scenario was not out of the ordinary for the quiet town. Between 11:35 and 11:40 a.m., Patricia left her volunteer position at the elementary school and began her walk home. On her short trip, Patricia was witnessed by a crossing guard on Palisade Avenue. She also waved at a passing mailman. This would be the last confirmed sighting of her. Patricia arrived home to the answering machine blinking. Reports say that she listened to the message from her mother and returned the call. During this telephone conversation, Patricia assured her mother that everything was fine at the home and that she was aware of the alarm situation. Her mom recalls that the rest of the conversation was normal. This would be the last time that anyone on record ever spoke with Patricia Viola. At some point between 1:11 p.m. and 4 p.m., Patricia, by unknown means and for unknown reasons, left her home again. She had no mode of transportation and had not told anybody, not her husband, her mother, her best friend Toinette, nor anyone at the library about any plans to go anywhere that day. According to a reading of the alarm control panel, Patricia performed a reset of the home's security system at 1:11 p.m. Likely, this was her rearming the alarm system on her way out of the home. As the alarm had been triggered that morning, a reset of the system was required in order to rearm the security capabilities. As such, many assume that the mother of two left the home sometime between the reset at 1:11 p.m. and when Jim returned home from work, which was at 4:30 p.m. Nobody knows if Patricia left voluntarily or if she was forced to leave. At 4:30 p.m., Jim returned home to find that the alarm had been reset and was beeping at his entry. Upon entering the house, he noticed that Patricia was nowhere to be found. As the family only set the alarm system before going to bed or prior to leaving the house, Jim deduced that his wife was not home, but he did not become concerned until he saw that was left behind. Although Patricia's coat was missing, her purse, keys, cell phone, ID, and epilepsy medicine was still at home. The fact that Patricia failed to bring her anti-seizure medication was the most concerning to those closest to her, as she was meticulous about taking and carrying her medication. She required the medicine twice a day in order to stave off future seizures, which could further restrict her driving capabilities. Because of the architecture of the back door, The Viola family had to use a key to lock it. This key was always left inserted into the deadbolt. Strangely, when he got home, Jim found the key lying on the kitchen table, which was out of place. Confident that Patricia could have only departed the home on foot, Jim called friends and family while also consulting bus schedules to try and locate his wife. With no luck and having exhausted his options, at 11:58, Jim, now frantic, called police to report Patricia missing. Captain James Sepp of the Bogota Police Department took his complaint, and over the following days, local police conducted door-to-door searches to speak with neighbors, consulted taxi logs from all the car services in town, and stopped buses to be searched along the main routes. While the community response was robust, it was all to no avail. The Bogota Police Department also consulted with Port Authority police to inspect flight manifests from nearby airports. They also checked that no jumping attempts had been reported at the George Washington Bridge that day. The Viola family, alongside concerned neighbors and friends, papered the area with missing person flyers. 3 days after Patricia's disappearance, investigators brought in police dogs to search the ground while also conducting aerial searches. Law enforcement kept in touch with area hospitals as well. However, no Jane Doe's nor Patricia Viola's were ever checked in. Nothing, no evidence, no trace of Patricia's whereabouts or even her mere presence turned up in the ensuing days. Each day that progressed with no news caused Patricia's family to fear that the worst had happened. 2 weeks after Patricia went missing, frustrated at the stagnation of the investigation, Jim and Toinette intensified their own search for Patricia. Toinette spoke to every drugstore and corner shop within walking distance from the Viola home. The pair noted that the singing monkey gift that Patricia had mentioned wanting to buy for Jim was in stock at a Rite Aid pharmacy nearby. Toinette showed the store clerk a picture of Patricia, and the worker did recall seeing Patricia in the store on the day she went missing. However, he said that he had no idea where or in which direction she went after leaving the store. Jim focused his search on local hospitals, as well as his theory at the time was that Patricia may have had another epileptic seizure, of which amnesia could be a possible side effect. But just as police had canvassed and come up with no leads, so too did Patricia's husband. Jim himself was investigated, as the husband or romantic partner is statistically the most likely to have committed violence against the missing woman, but he was ruled out by investigators. He first drew suspicion when it was discovered that he had taken the afternoon off of work the day that his wife went missing, but his alibi of being out shopping for Valentine's Day gifts for his wife checked out. He also passed a polygraph exam and has been fully cooperative with the investigation. Jim has continued to keep Patricia's case alive through legislation, media coverage, online discussions, and posters. Some close to the case wondered if there was more to the conflict that Patricia had had with Donna, Patricia's sister-in-law. It was agreed by all that her confrontation and subsequent harsh words were extremely out of character. Some suggested that possibly Donna had tripped the alarm in order to draw Patricia home early, and some also wonder where she was the day Patricia went missing and whether or not she was in the house when Patricia returned home from the library. Those close to the case say that it is odd Donna has not participated in any of the interviews or TV specials related to the case. 1 month after Patricia's disappearance, investigators received a tip from someone who said he saw the woman in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania while stopped at a red light. The Viola family did have a timeshare in nearby Shawnee, Pennsylvania, but although there was hope that the sighting would prove legitimate, nothing ever came of this, and it is unclear if the witness ever saw Patricia or merely a woman who looked similar to her. 1 year after Patricia mysteriously vanished, a man called the Bogota Police Department and claimed that Patricia was in fact dead. He also claimed responsibility for the killing. He said to investigators on the phone, quote, "I killed the old girl." But soon, the police were able to rule this out as a false confession, as the caller had also claimed to have Patricia's driver's license with him, which she had most certainly left behind when she vanished. Further investigation by police into this matter eventually proved this man's confession a hoax. Then, on the stifling hot summer day of July 27, 2002, a left foot, shoe and sock were discovered washed up on the 123rd Street stretch of Rockaway Beach in Queens, New York. This was roughly 45 miles away from the Viola's home in New Jersey. Rockaway Beach runs roughly 5.5 miles across the Atlantic Ocean with projected currents, making it so Patricia's origination was undetermined. Police did conduct additional searches on foot and by helicopter, but no additional remains nor clues ever surfaced. DNA samples were along with the remains in 2005 to be tested. In 2009, New York sent the DNA sample to the Combined DNA Index System lab in West Texas. In 2008, New Jersey finally adopted Patricia's law after tireless efforts by her husband, Jim, to get laws concerning missing people passed. This law was to supplement Title 52 of the revised statutes, which develops the best practices protocol for all law enforcement agencies to follow when addressing reports of missing persons or unidentified deceased human remains. The new law forced officers to begin to investigate missing persons reports immediately, and required that DNA be secured from victims' family and cross-checked in national databases for cases open longer than 30 days. By 2010, requirements to cross-check DNA under Patricia's law were securely in place. On September 12, 2012, poignantly, the first missing person whose remains were officially identified through the adoption of this new law was Patricia Viola herself. Her remains were identified by the New York City Medical Examiner's Office. No other artifacts have ever been recovered in connection to her case. With only 1 foot to go on, no cause of death could ever be determined. Investigators continued to suspect foul play and asked the public for any help or information. On February 25, 2013, Patricia Viola was buried in Hackensack Cemetery in New Jersey. If Patricia had or was in the middle of another epileptic seizure, it could have explained her erratic behavior in the days leading up to her disappearance. Due to experiencing such an event, it was possible that she had left her home for unknown reasons and then tried to seek medical attention for an attack that happened en route, or perhaps her exit was initially for medical services themselves. As with neurological side effects, she may have not been in a state to contact anybody or indicate her whereabouts. Some wonder if perhaps Patricia had a seizure on her way back home from Rite Aid and then disappeared somewhere along her route. In a morbid and odd connection to another murder case, just 5 years before Patricia went missing in October of 1997, a triple homicide occurred in the house directly across the street from the Viola home. The incident had been a robbery homicide which targeted a diamond dealer in the house. Besides the diamond dealer, 2 others were murdered as well. 4 men were eventually arrested for the crime and their trial was underway at the time of Patricia's disappearance. According to available reports and information, Patricia was not a witness to that crime and had no official ties to it. Still, some theorized that she was potentially kidnapped or killed either because someone believed her to be a witness or because of a case of mistaken identity targeting an actual witness in the area. Others wonder about the curious incident with the alarm system going off. It's been theorized that someone may have been waiting in the Viola house for Patricia to return. One theory suggests that Patricia's return home may have been interrupted by a burglar or another intruder, who then attacked or forced her to leave against her will. This possibility adds to the mystery of her disappearance, and despite ongoing efforts, her case remains open and unsolved. Authorities have classified her case as a homicide investigation, and a $10,000 reward has been offered for anyone who comes forward with valuable information that could help solve her death. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video, and remember, the search for truth never stops.